Hey guys, I wanted to let you in on a great benefit to using a Pro Series console, and that's having the ability to use an iPad to control many of the features on the console. So I'm going to be showing you how to download and install the app, as well as connecting it to the console and an overview of the functionality of the app. Let's go ahead and download the files. To download the program for your iPad, you need to head to the Apple Store and search out Mixtender 2. As you see here, I already have it on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and click the download button and wait for it to download. We see the download is in progress, and within a few moments we'll be ready to launch the app. Now that we have the Mixtender 2 downloaded to the iPad, let's go ahead and open the app up. We see here that we're disconnected at this time. That's because I'm not connected to the console. We're going to get into that in a few moments. But if you don't have the console in front of you and you do want to get familiar with the app, you can go ahead and engage the demo mode. This brings up the option to use the app for the Pro 1, the Pro 2, the ProX, or the XL8. One thing to keep in mind, regardless of which console you're going to be using, the Mixtender 2 app is going to work for all of the Pro Series consoles. In demo mode, it gives you full functionality as if you were connected to the console. I'm not going to go into demo mode, but we're going to use the app connected to the console to see how it works and all the features that you have available. So let's flip back over. To get the iPad to connect and see the console, we need to plug in a router into the back of the console. Here, I'm going to show you the simple steps on how to plug a router into the back of the console. This is going to be the same for all the consoles, the Pro 1, the 2, 2C, 369, and ProX. So let's check that out. Here, I have a standard wireless router. On the back, as you would expect to find, we have 4 LAN ports and 1 WAN port. The WAN port is what you would normally connect into if you were connecting for internet. But for the console setup, we need to plug into one of the 4 LAN ports. It doesn't matter which one we're plugging into, they all have the same type of connection. So now we'll plug our standard Cat5e cable into the back, and then on the other side, I'm going to plug this into the Ethernet controlled number 2 port on the back of the Surface here. For Pro 3, 6, 9, and ProX consoles, you'll have 2 Ethernet control ports. For Pro 1, Pro 2, and 2C, you'll have a separate Ethernet control on the back of your consoles as well. So now that we have the router connected to the back of the console, you probably already set up the router to have its unique name and a password that only you have access to. So let's go to the Preferences page, and the Configuration tab. You'll see down on the bottom right-hand side that we're going to look at the remote control server. You see that I already have it actively running and that there's an IP address assigned. Straight out of the box, most routers are usually defaulting to 192.168.1.0 or 1.1. Might suggest you put 40 or 50 different numbers between that for better connection. So that's why I'm using 192.168.1.50. So once you put the IP address number in that's different than the router, you can go ahead and click the Start button, and you'll notice that the status will change to active. And now let's go over to the iPad and put in the same IP address to connect. So now that we have the router connected to the console and we have the remote control server set up and running and showing active, let's go ahead and put the IP address in the window. On my console, I have it as 192.168.1.50. Now we hit connect, and we see now we're connected to the console. Now that the app is open and we see our meter screen, let's go ahead and just verify that we have connection to the console. There's a couple of ways to do it. I usually like to just go ahead and press mutes on the master faders, or we could also move the faders up and down, and we see on the console that the faders are actually following every move that we make. Another way to go ahead and check to make sure that we have connection is by engaging some of the playbacks or bringing live inputs into the console. For here, I'm just going to press play on my playback system. As you see, we have levels coming in on the console and everything is working as it should. Now, there's several great benefits to using the app. I personally like to use the app to control my graphic equalizers during the show. This is a quick way that I can access any of the graphic EQs to make any corrections to the PA. This is also great if you're using a graphic EQ on any of your matrix mixes, or if you're going to be doing monitors from front of house. So it's just like reaching over to a graphic EQ when you were using them in the hardware version. So now let's get into the app a little bit. On the left-hand side, we have our input meters. If we click on any of the meters, it's going to bring up the bank of 8 faders. Here, we can make all of our movements on the faders, we can mute, we can solo, and we can also assign the solo to area B. Down on the bottom, we see a visual representation of gain in dB levels. Before I go into all the details of each channel, one great way to bring the fader to unity is if you double tap on the fader and it'll snap it right to 0. Now let's take a look inside the channel and see what kind of processing that we can control. To access the channel, we could just click on the names above the faders. Here we see the kick drum is highlighted in blue, so let's select that. Here inside the channel view, on the left-hand side, we have our gain trim. Below that, we have the channel delay. Again, this is not creative type of delay like on a vocal where you'd hear number of repeats. Below that is our pan control knob. To the right, we have our compressor where we see our gain reduction window, the filter for our sidechain, and all the controls to adjust the compressor. Above that, we have the ability to toggle through the different types of compressor types. If we scroll over to the right, we have our gate. As you see here, we have our gate window, as well as our frequency window for our sidechain, and all the controls to the right of that for adjusting the gate. Above that, we have the ability to change from the gate to the transient gate or into the ducker. Now, we have our EQ window. This gives us full control to be able to make any changes to the EQ as needed. If you double click on the graphic EQ screen, it'll bring up an exploded view for more detailed view and control of the EQ. To close out of the detailed view of the channel, you can click either on the channel or you have the ability to hit the home button and it's going to bring you back to the home page to view all of the meters. So now let's go back into the channel so I can show you one thing. If we look over on the far right, we see that the masters are selected. This is all the levels going to either our left and right mono buses or any of the groups that we have assigned. Below that, we have the ability to go into fader flip mode, so we can scroll through all of our aux sends as well as all of our matrices. This is a great benefit, especially if you're going to be doing monitors from front of house. You could actually now be on the stage with your artist and make adjustments to the mixes. For example, let me go ahead and select aux send 63. As you see here, all the faders have flipped down, and you notice that down on the bottom now, we have an on button and a pre button. Once again, this is a great benefit to be able to have control of this while you're on the stage. So once you turn on all of your channels and you make them pre, especially since we're going to be doing a monitor mix, we can now go ahead and make our adjustments and give them signal and level that they need on for their mixes. Now let's pop into the Aux Returns channels. I'm going to select Aux Returns 1 through 8. Again, we have the same controls as the input channels, as well as the ability to go ahead and flip the fader mode. But let's go into the expanded view of the channel. So I'm going to select Aux Return 1. Here we have a gain trim, as well as the delay and the pan control. And then just to the right, we have an EQ. Again, we have full control of the EQ parameters, and by double tapping on the EQ window, we can bring up an exploded, more detailed view of the EQ for better control. Now, let's look at the aux sends. So let's click on drum room. In the aux send, we see that we have our gain trim, our insert channel delay, as well as our panning. We also have the ability, as you remember, to add a compressor to any of the aux sends. So here we can have full control of the compressor. Then, if we move to the right, we have our EQ window. Once again, like all the other channels we've seen so far, if you double tap on the EQ screen, it'll bring in an exploded view of the EQ. And last, I forgot to mention that you have the ability to change the colors of the channels from within, as well as the names. Now let's pop into the matrix channels. Here in matrix 1 through 8, we see that I have my subsends, my front fills, my delays, and my mono sends for controlling outputs to the PA. So this is where I'm going to spend a lot of my time during my initial setup of the show. So if I'm adjusting my subsend for the main PA as well as my front fill, I usually like to be standing in a different place or walking around the venue, not just being at front of house. Here, inside the front fill matrix, we have our gain trim as well as our output delay. This is a great way for me to be able to time align the front fills to the main PA, so I could be in optimal listening positions and not just be stuck at the front of house, especially if the front of house mix position is not the best location. And as many of you engineers know, front of house may not be the best place to hear a mix. Then to the right, we have our compressor with full control of the compressor parameters. And here to the right, we have our EQ. As you see, we have a graphic EQ that's inserted on this channel. So now we have the ability to make all of our graphic EQ adjustments. We can double tap on the graphic EQ, and just like in the graphic EQ window, we now have full access control to our graphics to make any EQ adjustments as we need. Again, having the ability to walk around with the iPad in hand to make EQ adjustments and tune the PA as we need is going to make our lives so much easier. And in the Masters window, you see we have control of our master faders as well as our mutes and our solos. Next, let's head to the VCA window. If we double tap that, we see that we have all of our VCAs. This gives us the ability to mix the show in different locations away from the console. If we click on any of the names of the VCA groups, we see that it'll bring up all of the channels that are associated to that VCA. This is a great way to be able to access these channels and make any changes if need be. It's just the same if we're engaging the VCA on the console and it brings all of the faders to the top layer. If we click on the Edit button, we now have the ability to go ahead and add or remove channels from the VCA. Here inside the Pop Groups window, we have the ability to select to bring up all the channels associated to the pop group. This is a great way for us to have quick instant access to any of the channels that we might need to make changes to. Just like the VCAs, we do have the ability to go ahead and edit to add or remove any channels associated to this pop group. Also, you do notice on the right that we have the ability to go into fader flip mode for any of our aux sends or matrix sends. So there you have it. That's the quick overview of the Mixed Ender app for the iPad. I suggest if you have an iPad that you go ahead and get a router and get it connected to your console as soon as possible. You will see that it's a quick time-saving tool to have, and you probably won't ever want to mix without one again. I'm not saying that you want to mix your shows directly on the iPad. You can if you want to, but as I said, I like to use it as a tool to help me in my day-to-day workflow.